I think that there's a recognition within the mental health system that they actually have a role and a responsibility to address safety issues. And that hasn't historically been the case. There seemed to be a real separation between what happens within the context of a treatment environment and then what happens outside. And increasingly, I think there's a recognition that it's a community that we serve, not just an individual, and that the court is a part of that community, and that we've had a chance to see over time the mental health community be more involved, more willing to be involved, less fearful of those individuals with criminal justice histories, and willing to actively step in and be a partner.
So a day in the life of a probation and parole officer it includes court, it includes meeting with clients, it includes being in their homes, making sure that there aren't compliance issues, which means that they're complying with their probation. So a day in the life of a probation officer there's a lot of variety.
Every state's criminal justice system is different. Having said that, they also have many things in common. It's important that you understand how an individual progresses through the criminal justice system in your county. This will allow you to better understand the roles that different criminal justice professionals play, how they interact with one another, and where there may be opportunities for collaboration between criminal justice and behavioral health professionals. More often than not, people with mental illnesses who are involved with the criminal justice system first became involved in the system during an encounter with a law enforcement officer. In criminal justice policy, this stage in the process of a person's experience with the criminal justice system is called pre-booking, because the individual has not been booked into the system yet. In these encounters, the law enforcement officer must quickly evaluate the specific circumstances of the situation and act in a way that is consistent with his agency's policies. The officer may decide that no action is required. The officer may also decide that the person should be arrested or taken to a medical or mental health facility for immediate care. During booking, intake officers collect specific identifying information, including name, birth date, and address. Officers will also ask a series of medical questions, and they will then assign the individual to a jail housing unit that takes into account any special medical needs and the amount of supervision that is required. The individual will then appear for an initial appearance before a magistrate or a judge who presents the charges and the rights of criminal defendants, and then explains that the individual has the opportunity to plead guilty or not guilty. If the individual pleads not guilty, the judge will decide whether the individual should be released into the community during the trial, and if this is the case, the judge will decide what conditions of supervision or bail to set. Court procedures can be complex. Here are some of the most important moments in a court case. Arraignment is when the prosecutor announces the charges that the individual is facing. Indictment, which occurs only in felony cases, is when a decision is made to proceed with formal charges. This decision is often made by a grand jury. Then there is trial, which can end in a couple of different ways. The defendant can plead guilty, or a jury can find him or her guilty or innocent. Sentencing is when a judge assigns a specific punishment to an individual who is found guilty. Common criminal court sentences include fines, incarceration, and probation. Individuals who have been in pretrial detention, that is, who remained in jail during their trial, may be sentenced to time served, which means that the judge believes that the time an individual is spent incarcerated before sentencing serves as the necessary punishment. Once sentenced by a judge, the individual will be transferred to jail or prison, or released into the community to report to his probation officer. An individual may be discharged from jail or prison into the community with conditions of supervision that he must follow. If an individual is under supervision by a probation or parole officer, the individual must demonstrate compliance with his conditions of supervision, or the probation or parole can be revoked and the individual reincarcerated. Individuals with mental illnesses may experience a different path through the criminal justice system. Their experience can differ in two primary ways. The first is during a trial. In order to stand trial, a defendant must be able to assist in his own defense. If he suffers from a mental illness, he may be evaluated to determine whether he is fit or competent to stand trial. An individual who is found unfit or incompetent may be required to undergo treatment to restore competency. In this case, the individual would later return to the typical criminal justice process. An individual who is found competent proceeds in the criminal justice process as usual. The second difference takes place after trial. After trial, an individual may be found not guilty by reason of insanity. States vary in terms of how they name and define NGRI, but the basic idea is that although the defendant committed the crime, he was unable to appreciate the nature of the actions. A finding of not guilty by reason of insanity usually leads to a period of inpatient treatment. This process gets a lot of media attention and is common on legal procedural shows. However, national research shows that the insanity defense is generally raised in only about 1% of felony indictments. There's a great temptation for service providers and those planning programs to address every need that they identify. Providers do this with the best of intentions in trying to help the individuals before them. However, we know that only certain needs actually affect whether an individual is likely to recidivate. Research shows us that certain interventions reduce recidivism and others don't. Specifically, programs should address 8 core criminogenic needs. These needs include antisocial attitudes, antisocial beliefs, antisocial friends and peers, antisocial personality patterns, high conflict family and intimate relationships, substance abuse, low levels of achievement in school and or work, and unstructured and antisocial leisure time. In contrast, programs that target self-esteem, anxiety, neighborhood improvements, and group cohesiveness actually do not affect participants' likelihood of recidivating.
The thing that I didn't anticipate that was very surprising from my background as an ACT team clinician was the amount of criminal thinking that we were going to encounter in the mental health court that we ended up treating. I didn't anticipate that being there. My staff didn't anticipate that. From the mental health perspective, anytime anyone hears typically antisocial traits, personality things, everybody wants to back off and go, whoa, those aren't our people. And what we've learned is those traits are going to be there, and we can have a huge impact helping improve outcomes for those folks.